Mitropolit Volokolamski Ilarion, šef odjela za vanjske poslove Ruske pravoslavne crkve, drugi je čovjek Ruske crkvene hijerarhije, odmah iza patrijarha Kirila. Manje je poznato da je ovaj visoki crkveni dužnosnik autor više od 600 publikacija, kompozitor klasične glazbe, doktor filozofije i teologije te istaknuti član Svjetskog saveza crkava KEKA. Mitropolit Ilarion za svog je posjeta Manastiru Lepavina dao ekskluzivni intervju za Duhovne izazove. Vaše visoko preosveštenstvo, thank you very much for being the guest of Interreligious magazine of Croatian National Television. What are your first impressions here in Croatia after meeting with the leadership of Serbian Orthodox Church and Orthodox believers today in Lepavina?
I must say that for the first time I heard about some Croatian cities during the war of 1991 to 95, when Russian television broadcasted live horrible scenes of bombings, of war. And for example, the city of Dubrovnik, which I visited on my way to Zagreb, and which is indeed a very beautiful city, a historical city. For the first time I heard about this at that time. And I was very happy to see Croatia now as a peaceful country, as a country where people of different ethnic origins and of different confessions coexist peacefully with each other. Of course, I understand that there are still many Serbian people who left Croatia at that time and who did not return. And this was the topic mentioned by President Josipovic yesterday when I met him in his residence. And he said that his concern is that all these people should come back to their homes, and that he makes it one of the priorities of his political agenda. And I was very satisfied to hear this.
You are a member of Russian Orthodox Church Holy Synod. How do you perceive relations between Russian Church and Russian government today?
These relations are based on two principles. One principle is non-interference into the internal affairs of each other. For example, the state doesn't interfere into our internal affairs. We are free to elect our patriarch, our bishops. There is no influence from the state, as was the case in the past when the Soviet state controlled the internal life of the church. And of course, the church is not involved in political struggle. It is not involved in political processes, though it very often speaks openly about various aspects of political and social life. So this is one principle, non-interference. The other principle, no less important, is the cooperation between the church and the state in all the areas in which such cooperation is necessary, appropriate and timely. For example, in the field of demography, in various social questions. There are many projects which the state and the church are accomplishing together.
What is the legal position of Russian Church today? Do you have all the privileges?
The legal position of the Russian Church is exactly the same as that of other traditional confessions. There is no single law which would single out the Russian Orthodox Church or which would give some privileges to the Russian Orthodox Church. On the other hand, in daily life, both the state and the people recognize the importance of the Orthodox Church, and in many ways the Patriarch of Moscow is not only the leader of the Orthodox community in Russia, but he is also first among the religious leaders who often come together to discuss various issues, and for whom he is the point of reference. The interreligious situation in Russia is based on a very strong solidarity of the traditional confessions. For example, we have the Interreligious Council of Russia, which meets regularly and which discusses various social issues. And in practically all cases, the religious leaders come to the same position, and then they present this position to the state. So it is not only the position of the Orthodox Church, but it is also the position of other traditional religions.
What about the finances? How do you finance your work? Do you get any help from the state, or just from what you get from believers?
There is no financial help from the state. The Church is financially dependent on itself, on its faithful, and on its sponsors. So in many parishes, it is only the donations of the faithful which constitutes the financial basis of their existence.
We all know about the difficulties and persecutions your church and your believers went through during communism. So which place does religion take in ordinary Russian citizens' life today? How many people practice their faith?
If you ask people on the street, who are you? I think 70 or 80% will reply, we are Orthodox Christians. This does not necessarily mean that all of them would go to church on Sunday. There is a gap between those who identify themselves as Orthodox Christians and those who are practicing Christians. We do not have any crisis of vocations, as happens in many Western countries. In recent 25 years, we opened almost 800 new monasteries. And this is happening during the time which many in the West call post-Christian epoch. So I am saying, if you want to be sure that we are living not in a post-Christian epoch, you just come to Russia, to the Ukraine, to Moldova, to Belarus, and see how many completely new monasteries have been built, and how many monks and nuns are now living in these monasteries. Mostly these are very young people.
You represent Russian Orthodox Church in ecumenical and interfaith commissions for the theological dialogue. In your opinion, what are the key obstacles for Christian unity?
There are, of course, various historical obstacles. For example, there are lots of bitter memories among Christian confessions. And here in this country, I think you will understand what I mean. Because for many decades, and in some cases for many centuries, Christians of different confessions were in fight with each other. They did not live peacefully. They killed each other. And this is a memory which is ingrained in people's minds. There are also some theological obstacles which we inherited from the past. And there are, in addition to this, obstacles which arise at present time. For example, it becomes less and less possible for us to conduct a fruitful dialogue with the Protestant communities, because many Protestant communities no longer share some of the traditional Christian moral values.
Such as?
Such as, for example, marriage as a union between a man and a woman. In some Protestant communities in the West and in the North, they decided to enlarge this notion to keep up with the secular liberal standards. And there are even some Protestant communities in which they give blessings to same-sex unions. And of course, when we have such a diversity of views, and where we see such a strong deviation from the initial Christian tradition, we have to suspend the dialogue, which happens in some cases with our dialogues with Protestant communities.
What about relations between Vatican and Moscow Patriarchate? When will we get to see the meeting between your Patriarch and the Pope?
I think the relations are getting better, though we also have some problems which have to be discussed and on which we have to come to a common position before such meeting takes place. I believe that it will indeed take place. I also believe that every day we become closer to this meeting by one day. But we are not speaking now about the time or about the place, because what is important for us is the content of this meeting and its possible consequences. And we must be sure that the content of this meeting corresponds to the need of our faithful, and that should it take place, it allows us to open a new page in our relations.
In October we are marking the Edict of Milan, a very important anniversary for Christians as they gained their religious liberties back then. How do you see religious liberties in today's world? Some Christians face big difficulties, especially the ones in the Middle East.
We are very concerned about the fate of Christians in the Middle East. We see that in recent years there is a tendency, which you can see in many Middle Eastern countries, and which is the same in all places. And this is a tendency which leads to the practical extermination of Christianity in the Middle Eastern regions. For example, 10 years ago there was the invasion into Iraq. The regime changed, and during the last 10 years the Christian population of Iraq diminished from 1.5 million to about 150,000 people. So only 1/10 of the Christian population has remained in Iraq. We are very concerned about what is happening in Egypt, where militant Islamists burn Christian churches, kill Christian believers, and we are indeed very concerned about what may happen in Syria, and in many places is already happening, because 4 months ago two Christian metropolitans were abducted by the rebels, and nobody knows exactly where they are, whether they are still alive, and we are very concerned not only about them, but about many others who were either abducted or killed or became refugees in their own country. And we see that in all places where extremists come to power, the first thing they do is to get rid of the Christian population. And we are very concerned about the current sequence of events when political leaders speak about the possible invasion into Syria, but nobody speaks about the fate of Christians, and nobody seems to be concerned about what will happen to the Christians should this invasion take place.
Thank you very much for this interview and being our guest.
Thank you.